Welcome everyone. Today we're going to explore family discovery, which is a structured way for families to observe and communicate everyday strengths, interests and environmental preferences that inform meaningful employment pathways. During today's program, we will introduce the framework, some practical strategies and tools that can assist families to deliver or the family discovery program. It's important to recognise that family discovery doesn't replace discovery. It's actually been developed as a way to provide more engagement from families in discovery and in customised employment, or for that matter, disability employment in general. This is partly because we often find families feel that they're not a part of the process, and this is a methodology that allows families to be actively involved in the disability employment process. So let's get going. So why does it matter? Well, discovery is about identifying strengths through observation, through engagement, but families also have a longitudinal understanding of what works, what doesn't and why. And their observations provide critical information that strengthens the accuracy and sustainability of employment planning. I mean, we know that families see everyday skills that others miss. We know that they see natural routines that when they talk about them, they can reveal authentic competencies. That families understand environmental preferences because they see that at home where it's clear. And family can build insight into both the confidence and the direction of the employment journey, rather than being, as some families have described, a passive recipient of services. So it matters not just for that, but for a whole range of reasons, because at the end of the day, families are a vital part of the employment process, and we should never ignore their contributions, because at the end of the day, families will be there long after employment professionals have left the scene. So, family discovery and customised employment. Well, it sits along discovery. It doesn't replace it, it actually enriches it, because it contributes micro-level insight that strengthens the meso-level planning and organisational fidelity, helping to create better employer matches. It's a key part of customised employment because, as it says, it enriches the process by integrating family insights into every stage. I'll give you some really good examples a little bit further on in this talk. Okay. So why family discovery? Well, because family discovery is not informal guessing. It's structured, it's guided, and it's aligned with customised employment fidelity standards. Families become collaborative partners in the planning process. And to that end, what we've done is we've actually developed a training program for families because we want families to do this. And we deliver this to families at no cost. And if you're a professional and want to engage with families, we have a training program that'll teach you how to do it and provide the resources for families. So that's a discussion if you'd like to have, by all means, let's have it. So families also, as it says there, also not just understand strengths and interests, but they also understand the sensory and environmental needs that will make employment possible for their loved ones. And that's something that's often overlooked, the sensory component of the employment process, because often employment programs by and large are actually in a bit of a hurry to get to milestones. But if you understand or you ignore the sensory side of the process, particularly for neurodiverse clients, you're not going to achieve the outcomes that you expect. If anything, you're actually going to potentially traumatize clients with some of the activities that you'll undertake. And we need to avoid that. So, what are the core principles of family discovery? Well, the principles guide families on how to observe and interpret what they see. They ensure the process remains supportive, person-led, and grounded in psychological safety. The principles sit around authentic information that emerges in natural environments. It takes into account that families have long-term valuable knowledge. that talks about strength recognition. That's more important than deficit identification. Most families, when you talk to them, will talk to you about their child, their siblings' abilities. Right? They provide it through the form of a narrative, not assessment. It's a narrative. And I'll show you a little bit later on the sensory comfort mapping tool we developed that enables a very detailed narrative to take place. It builds trust through presence, which are essential for collaboration, really important conditions. So the process itself is straightforward, accessible, and designed for families with no prior experience, employment or disability practice. It gives structure to what families already see. In other words, it provides an opportunity for us to take what we see and might not necessarily have the words and actually find the words to describe it. So it's about guided observation in daily activities. It's about identifying natural strengths and interests, mapping the sensory and environmental preferences. And that's important because discovery is designed to answer two questions. The first one being, who is this person? And the second one, what are their ideal conditions of employment? And the sensory component is a very, very strong driver of employment success or failure, particularly for neurodiverse people. It aids in building vocational themes, and it provides insights that can be integrated into a customised employment plan. There are practical strategies, right? Because practicality is the key. Discovery is about turning the everyday into vocational clues and taking those clues and coming up with a plan. It's as simple as that. And yes, it might sound simple, but it can be simple if you have a structure and you have some knowledge. So we look for routines that are repeated with confidence and interest. We notice what task the person returns to without prompting. We look at the sensory comfort zones, the lighting, the sound, the space. We watch for persistence, creativity, problem solving. We identify natural preferences, social preferences, such as pacing, people, and the context that makes sense for them. And we capture small moments that reveal bigger patterns. If you look at all of those things, and these are important aspects to capture and to understand around a person, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to take the everyday, the skills that they have, and map them to potential vocational pathways. In other words, if you look at some of the work we do, when we look at the sensory side of things, those social preferences, the sensory comfort zones, if you can identify them and get a good grasp of what they are for the client, then you can start to look at that and go, okay, so where does that make sense in an employment environment? And if you can start to identify environments where the sensory comfort zones exist, then you can start to go, okay, if this is where those sensory comfort zones exist in these employment settings, let's go and look at those employment settings and see what employment exists there and whether there are opportunities that we can have a look at, whether through job design or customizing, that might create an opportunity for the client. Now, some of the insights, and there are lots of insights, and often the family insights are dismissed. You go there, you have a conversation, you go, oh, that's lovely, and off you go because, supposedly you're an employment professional. But without the family, none of this is going to happen. So you need to be able to approach employers with evidence-based, personally grounded information. And where do you get that? You can get a lot of that through the family lens. Participants' gardening routine, the tasks they undertake routinely, may reveal spatial and sequencing strengths. The sensory observations may lead to an employment setting that reduces anxiety. A hobby, recognised parents, could be a negotiated micro role. Family narratives often uncover customer service skills hidden in the social routines at home. Things that families take for granted, that if you apply your employment professional lens to, you can go, you know what, I actually see those things happen in this particular workplace. Relatively simple, relatively straightforward. But often these are hidden because we haven't engaged with the families. So how do we do that? Well, we've developed a range of evidence-based tools to use for families and for impressionals. Now, you can look at the Discovery Experience Reflection Scale, or the DERS, which is an opportunity for the person that we're delivering discovery for, or customized employment for, to reflect on their feeling of discovery. What does discovery feel like for them? Are they a part of it, or is someone just delivering something to them? You can develop deep insight from the individual and how they feel about the discovery process, which also can inform how you deliver discovery professionally to individuals. The Sensory Comfort Mapping Tool. This is a brilliant tool. It's a conversation tool that explores different aspects of the sensory world for the client. You can use this with clients, and the information you discover is quite extraordinary, and you can develop a profile, a sensory profile from this information. It's a 2-page document. I used it with a client recently. Actually, I use it with all the clients as my starting point, because I think one of the most important things you can do with a client is develop a relationship where they're able to express themselves and talk about the things that are important to them. And a lot of those things will be sensory. I worked with a young man the other day, and he talked for 2 hours, and he explained all of the elements that made sense for him that he needs in a workplace. Now, he didn't do it in distinct terms. He just talked about the things that happen in workplaces, the things he'd experienced, and why he left this one or couldn't work in this one or whatever. And you can relate all of those to different sensory elements. Awesome. Another client I worked with, similar exercise. You start to map out what are the sensory elements in a workplace that create anxieties, that make it impossible for them to walk through the door. These are all important elements to understand, because we are trying to work out what the ideal conditions of employment are. And this tool helps us do that. Family Observation Worksheet. This is part of the family discovery process, where families are able to take those observations and translate them into employability skills. Families don't necessarily see a lot of the things at home as employment skills, but if you give families the tools and the support to write a narrative, then you will discover very quickly that families will go, hey, you know what? That works in a workplace. If that, you could do that as part of that job. Really important, very powerful. The Vocational Narrative Builder, also a very, very important tool, because it tells a story. It takes everything we've discovered in family discovery and tells a story that's focused at a vocation. And this helps build vocational themes, which in turn become the things we explore that become the employment pathway, which lead to job development. The Family Experience Reflection Scale, which is called FERS, or abbreviated to FERS. Now, you can use that if you like or not, but it talks about the family and their experience of discovery, the things that they see, the things that we need to know that we might have missed. A very, very good tool as well. So these are all tools that have been developed to enhance the discovery process, to enhance how professionals work, to enhance family engagement, to enhance participant engagement, so we can build a richer story and uncover information that leads to meaningful employment, individually meaningful, in a place that makes sense for the client. So, connecting families with discovery FERS. Now, DERS allows families and individuals to reflect on how well discovery captured their family member. It identifies overlooked areas. It helps provide structured feedback, and it strengthens the collaborative relationship, because employment is a collaboration. Discovery, customized employment, is a collaboration. It takes time. It is also a capacity building tool, because all of these little things that you discover are elements that can build a person's capacity for employment. And that's particularly important, certainly in NDIS employment, which is a capacity building framework about building a person's capacity for employment. And you can build that from the things that you discover at home and in the person's life and in their community. Now, FERS is often delivered or undertaken by the individual, but often where there are cognitive barriers, families can participate in this, and it becomes a joint exercise. And it, again, produces really rich information that you can work with. Family discovery within the system, the equilibrium systems model of employment, which is the bigger picture. Families are at the micro level where they contribute insight, valuable insight. Organisations can take this at the meso level and integrate into their planning around job development for the client. And at a macro level, it supports long-term sustainability and stability in the workplace and also across organisations. And it aligns with the Customised Employment Quality Assurance Framework and the C-Effect Fidelity Framework, which are important tools that ensure organisations deliver customised employment and discovery with fidelity to the evidence base and the evidence for practice, the principles of customised employment and discovery, if you like. So what are the benefits for families? Well, what families say to us is that replaces confusion with clarity and fear with confidence. One of the things that are often overlooked in the employment process is engagement with the family on a regular basis. What I will say is that everybody that delivers customised employment and discovery will find what works for them in terms of how they engage with families. But from my perspective, certainly in our employment program, and we have an employment program that supports our research and training practices, is that I try to get employment consultants and employment counsellors to engage with the families at the start of the process and at the end of the process for every visit. Recently, to give you an idea, I recently had family sit there for 2 hours with me and engage in the process, and it was like a family meal. Everybody was having a say. The participant was doing most of the talking, and the family were encouraging him to explore and talk more about the things that he does, his interests, all the little things that are often ignored. For families themselves, some families will come in at the start and say a few things and they'll disappear, and they'll come back at the end for a 15-minute recap and what's coming on next. Other families, I see them at the end of the process and they talk about, hey, so what happened today? And we talk about that and we tell them what the plan is for the next session, which brings clarity to the families, and importantly, it removes fear of what we're actually doing. Really important. It benefits because it gives them confidence that we're identifying strengths and preferences, builds that strong collaboration base with practitioners. It improves communication and shared decision making. It reduces anxiety through structured involvement, and it's fascinating the outcomes you can get from this. I had a young man that I'm doing a little bit of work with. Our staff are working with him full time, and I occasionally pop in and do a little bit of work with him. And now he rings me to see how I am. What does that tell you? That tells you that the relationship is great. I talk to him about what the staff are doing, and he talks about all the things they're up to. But he also talks to me about how am I going. I love that because it says that we've developed a relationship where he's interested in what I'm doing, I'm interested in what he's doing. Now, some people might think that, okay, not the sort of thing you should do, but we work with the clients where we find them. And if it helps to build a relationship for the client to ring every now and then and chew the fat, let's do that. That's a part of us as employment professionals, as employment counsellors, investing in the client because the client's investing in us. Really important. So, what does it do? What are the benefits? Well, it clearly improves employment outcomes because pathways reflect a person's natural context. It helps create more accurate vocational themes. It helps the work that we might find for the client align with their strengths and their preferences. Importantly, it increases and develops their self-advocacy and their self-determination, their autonomy, their capacity to speak for themselves and make decisions that reflect what they want and the type of work they want to do. It helps us develop a better sensory and environmental fit, and importantly, it helps us develop pathways to employment that have long-term sustainability. In other words, these are real jobs that have career pathways. They're not any job. They are the right job for the client right now, for a client to be able to pursue a career. Super important. For practitioners, family discovery saves time. It improves outcomes and reduces misalignment because we get a richer data. We're developing trust with the families. And I can tell you that in my thesis many years ago, which explored the factors that sustain long-term employment outcomes for people with a disability, it illustrated that relationships underpinned by trust are the number one factor in long-term successful employment outcomes, and that's built on trust. It provides clearer pathways to employer negotiation because we're not going in blind. We have a plan. We know what the environment looks like. It reduces trial and error. It develops higher fidelity, customized employment practices, and that's really super important because it's about employment professionals being professional, all right, not taking shortcuts. Family discovery is designed to be practical, inclusive across service roles. It provides details of how participants can access training, resources and organisational supports. Should be delivered by all of these people should use family discovery. It's really fascinating that when you go out and you engage your families and use the family discovery process. And what I will say is during the development of family discovery, I actually used the family program with families. I took the role of the family with families, with individuals, and I was absolutely gobsmacked at the amount of information that comes out of it, that the participant, the person themselves, starts to reveal and think about the things that they've talked about, the things they've revealed and their interests, and you kind of go, if these are the things that interest you, what would that look like as a job? And often I find that the people I'm supporting are actually able to describe that. They're able to describe what the job would look like. And then when you take that information and go, so what would that job be? And often, through those simple processes, you're able to come up with a whole bunch of jobs and go, these are interesting jobs. Do any of them actually interest you? And you'll come up with one or two, and you go out and explore them. Why are you going out to explore them? Because these are things the clients identified that make sense for them. So you go out and explore them. Go out and talk to those employers. Go out to those job sites and see how the client feels. And often, the client will feel good. Or often they'll say, you know what, this is an interesting pathway, but this is just one pathway we should look at. And I love that because the client hasn't jumped out straight away and gone, that's for me. I often think it's important that we explore a couple and maybe we end up back where we started. But at least we've had the opportunity to go out and explore all of the elements that make sense for the client and come back with one that this becomes our primary starting point. One of the things that I see, particularly using the sensory comfort mapping tool, is clients are able to map all the conditions and give voice to things that they feel. I've been to a number of places with a particular client I'm working with, and you can see how she reacts to them. And after using the sensory comfort mapping tool, we've been able to actually put into words her feelings. And through that, we've been able to identify places that kind of make sense for her. And what we're doing is we're actually going to do, what we would call 1/2 metre or 1 metre volunteering. In other words, we're actually going to go to those places and we're going to sit outside and look at them and see how she feels. And if she feels good, we're going to go in. But we're not going to go in to engage with the owners of the business. We're actually going to go in as clients, as customers, and see how she feels. And if it still feels okay, then we might engage, or we might just leave and come back another time when it makes sense. And it's interesting because all of a sudden, the people you're supporting start to think about the sensory side of things and what that might look like in a workplace, and they're actually able to start to identify environments where it makes sense for them that you can go and explore. And this is the richness of the data you get. And is this a quick process? No, it's not. Discovery, customized employment, is not a quick process. Discovery is about building a person's capacity to understand. It's about building a family's capacity to engage in the process as well. And that takes time. It's certainly not something you deliver in a milestone funded process, because milestones mean there's a rush to tick that box. And that's what discovery isn't. Person-centered employment isn't a milestone process. It's about the individual and what makes sense for them. So this is what family discovery is, and it's a bit of a nutshell process in the sense of what we've described here in this short workshop. And what I will say is that what you're seeing here with this particular presentation is in actual fact not the actual workshop that we ran for people with this presentation. This is the, shall we say, the abridged version, simply as a way of illustrating what happened during that discussion. So, if you want to know more about family discovery, you can email me, or you can email using our information set. You can see Peter Smith, peter.smith email address, or you can have a look online at our various programs. But family discovery is a process that, what I would say is, if you've actually got a group of families that want to understand this process and learn this process, this is something we deliver for free. Now, clearly, if we've got to travel, there is a cost involved in that. But for families, this is a free process, because this is about enriching the knowledge base of families so they can participate at a greater level, at a higher level in the discovery and customized employment process. If you're a professional who wants to support families with this, there is a separate program we have for professionals to show them how to deliver this for families, and at the same time there are a bunch of resources available. We've developed a lot of resources around this. One of the interesting things about the sensory comfort mapping tool is we've actually been able to develop a sensory readiness scale that the clients relate to, which is a really good guide when you're working with people that have challenges from a sensory perspective. A lot of this material we've developed is being developed in the field. It's evidence-based. We've sourced the evidence. We've written some of the evidence ourselves, which is in peer-reviewed papers and publications. But importantly, a lot of this is derived from practice. So our research is practice informed. And when it comes to the sensory side of things, I've got a family full of people on the spectrum, so it's kind of something we live, but that's a different story. So if you want to know more about it, by all means reach out and let's have a chat. Thanks for watching.